This story was written with 3 possible paths for a scene which occurs toward the end of this chapter. Originally, it was intended that the reader was simply left to imagine what happened. 2 of the outcomes of the scene have no bearing on the plot of the rest of the story. The third creates a totally different outcome. There will be a pause in the video where the scene diverges. I prefer one of them, so I will include it at the end of the pause, while the other 2 endings will appear at the end of the chapter. In the video description, the alternatives are listed with their respective timestamps in the video. Also listed is where the story resumes if all the options are ignored. All the alternatives are recommended for your entertainment, but the rest of the video and the next won't make much sense if you only listen to the third one, unless you pretend it doesn't happen. Pick your poison. Applejack knocked on Twilight's door. She waited a moment. She heard hoofsteps on the other side, and soon Applejack was, for the first time since her death, face to face with her murderer. Applejack's heart constricted as she fought to remain pleasant. It would all be over soon. "Hey, Applejack. Haven't seen you in a while. Come for a visit?" Applejack forced herself to smile. "Actually, I came to invite you over to a sleepover I'm having. Like you said, we haven't seen each other in a while, so I figured it'd be fun." She hoped she sounded natural. It was hard to think straight with those eyes looking at her. She could remember those eyes. She was looking right into them as she died, and her full... No! She couldn't think about that right now. Twilight didn't seem to notice anything. Well, that does sound like fun. I've never been on a sleepover." Applejack remembered that was the case. Twilight's first sleepover was supposed to be with her and Rarity. Applejack didn't even know if the date had passed or not. "Well, then, how about it? It'll be fun." Applejack felt like she was overdoing the enthusiasm, but again, Twilight didn't seem to notice. "Okay then, sure. Give me some time to get some stuff ready and I'll be at Sweet Apple Acres soon." Applejack nodded stiffly before giving a plastic smile. "See you then." Rarity opened a box of cupcakes, trying her best to sound inviting. "I made these for you. I thought we could, hang out today. Doesn't that sound like a marvelous idea? We've seen so little of each other recently. I felt we needed to have some time for us. We are, after all, the best of friends." She set the cupcakes down on an end table. Rarity almost snarled out that word, but she managed to keep herself in check. Twilight looked concerned. "I'm sorry, Rarity, but I already made plans with Applejack. She invited me to a sleepover." Rarity looked confused. "I would have thought you'd be invited too, and I'd see you there. Did Applejack not invite you?" Rarity's smile cracked. "Applejack? A sleepover? Oh, why, no, my dear, I wasn't told of this." Are you sure you'd rather be with Applejack today? Wouldn't you rather spend the day with me?" Twilight looked genuinely sorry, and for a moment Rarity wondered if this really was the same Twilight who had killed her and her friends. Of course, that thought was quickly dashed upon imaginary rocks. The same imaginary rocks Rarity wished Twilight's head would dash upon. "I'm sorry, Rarity, but I made plans with AJ first. I can't just leave her like that." Rarity tried not to panic. Her plan was unraveling, and it hadn't even begun yet. Quickly, she tried to spin a new plan from the tattered remains of the old one. "All right then, my dear, but at least take a cupcake. Trust me, they're to die for." Twilight glanced back down at the box of cupcakes before smiling again. "They do look delicious." She picked one up and ate it. She ate the entire thing in one bite, like Pinkie Pie always did. Rarity could tell she didn't think it tasted good. Well, it probably didn't with all those drugs in there. Still, Twilight forced a smile and said, Good." Rarity smiled genuinely this time. "Maybe I'll stop by after a while and see Applejack too? I'd hate to miss out on what sounds like a lovely get-together." Twilight forced down the last of the cupcake. "Yes, that sounds like a great idea. If you wait a while, I'll tell Applejack you're coming. I'm sure she wouldn't mind." No, thought Rarity, she wouldn't. "It's settled then. I'll go back home and pack some things, and I'll meet you there." Rainbow Dash was flying too fast to stop and crashed through Pinky's roof. Disoriented and aching, she shook her head and quickly got up and searched the house for Pinky. The roof could wait, and so could the ache in her hoof that told her she'd be really sore in the morning. If she was lucky enough to live that long, of course. Searching through the house, Rainbow Dash saw no sign of Pinkie Pie. Flying back out through the hole in the ceiling, she dropped down to the ground once outside, and ran into Sugar Cube Corner. Inside were Mr. and Mrs. Cake, working as usual. They looked up at her as soon as she rushed in. She didn't see Pinky, but that didn't mean Pinky wasn't there.
Rainbow Dash, what's wrong? You look like you've just run a marathon.
No time for that, Mrs. Cake. Is Pinky around? I need to talk to her.
Mrs. Cake shook her head.
No, I'm afraid she's not. She asked for the day off today, and we let her take it. The poor girl hasn't been feeling her best lately.
She looked genuinely sad.
Yeah, thanks anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Cake.
She ran outside and kept running. She had no idea where to look now, and while she could cover more ground in the air, she thought she might miss Pinky if she did.
Ugh!
Rainbow Dash had run into some pony, causing them both to fall to the ground. She really needed to stop crashing. Looking up, she saw Rarity, who was already picking herself up.
Can't stay and chat, Rainbow Dash. I'm in quite the hurry.
She darted off before Rainbow Dash could reply. Quickly, she got up and started running again. It was a good thing Pinkie Pie knew every pony in Ponyville, because that meant every pony knew her. Still, no pony knew where Pinkie Pie was. No pony had seen her all morning. She began to think. She really needed a destination. Wandering aimlessly wasn't working. She needed to avoid Twilight. She didn't know where Pinkie Pie was. Rarity had left for somewhere. Fluttershy was still sick. That left Applejack. Maybe she could explain things to Applejack. If Applejack believed her, maybe they could do something to stop Twilight. With no need to stay on the ground, Rainbow Dash took off as fast as she could. It wouldn't take too long to get to Sweet Apple Acres. Twilight, having finished gathering everything she needed for a sleepover, wasted no time, and simply teleported herself to just outside Sweet Apple Acres. She did consider walking, but decided there really wasn't a point. No pony would care if they saw her, and did she really want to walk through Ponyville and see more ponies than she already had to? Not really. She almost decided she didn't want to go at all. Applejack was obviously planning something suspicious. She was a nervous wreck when she invited Twilight to the sleepover, although she had tried to hide it. Perhaps she was planning a surprise party? If it was any pony but Applejack, Twilight probably wouldn't have agreed to go. But Applejack had something other ponies didn't, the element of harmony. Twilight didn't need Applejack to tell a huge lie to take the element from her, and ponies lied all the time. Hanging around at a sleepover would provide the perfect opportunity for Applejack to lie about something. Truth or Dare was practically made for it. In a flash of light, Twilight had arrived at Sweet Apple Acres. No pony was outside, so she simply walked over to the barn and knocked. Instantly, the door swung open, and Applejack was standing there, looking nervous. There was definitely something going on. Twilight quickly focused on Applejack's element, ready to pull it away from Applejack when the opportunity arose. She didn't expect it to happen so soon.
Howdy, Twilight. I sure am glad to see you.
A wobble, already. Twilight was so surprised, she didn't even try to pull the element away. Twilight acted natural as she replied.
I'm glad to see you too.
She stepped inside, and Applejack closed the door behind them.
Oh, Pinky's here too?
Twilight noticed Pinkie Pie standing behind a couch, as if she were trying to hide. Come to think of it, Pinky had been acting strangely as well. Unfortunately, she didn't come with a built-in magic lie detector. Something was going on, something serious, if Applejack was lying about being happy to see Twilight. Luckily, Applejack's element could be used to figure it out.
Sure is.
Twilight walked past and turned to face her, Pinky to Twilight's back.
I hope I didn't make it sound like this was just you and me.
About that. I told Rarity about the sleepover, and she said she might stop by later. You don't mind, do you?
Applejack put on an obviously forced smile as she said,
No, of course not. I don't mind at all.
A lie. That's good to hear. Twilight was unable to prevent the smirk on her face.
Tell me, Applejack, what were you planning for us today?
Applejack was sweating. Twilight mentally congratulated herself on so easily pushing Applejack into becoming a nervous wreck. If only she knew why it was so easy.
Well,
Go on, tell me what you're planning, she thought to herself.
I was, thinking,
continued Applejack. Her stammering was getting annoying.
that maybe, well, we'd hang around the farm for now.
No lies yet.
And then we'd eat some supper.
Okay.
And then we'll see what happens after that.
Twilight wanted to groan. There was no lie there, because Applejack hadn't offered any real information.
As long as it's fun.
Applejack looked nervously at Pinkie Pie.
Don't you worry none, Twilight. We'll have heaps of fun together.
She had lied again. This time, Twilight pulled. She lowered her head down so Pinkie couldn't see the spark from her horn. Maybe it was from so much wobbling in such a short span of time, but Applejack's element was a lot easier to take than Fluttershy's. There was hardly any concentration needed at all. Without warning, Applejack wavered in place, and then fell over. Her eyes were open, but just barely.
Applejack!
Twilight quickly bound the element of honesty to herself before seeing Pinkie Pie zoom past and kneel beside Applejack. She was crying.
What did you do to her?
Twilight could hear hoofsteps coming from somewhere upstairs. They got closer. She turned around and saw Big Mac come down and stop dead in his tracks as he saw his sister collapsed on the floor.
She did something!
Then it clicked. Twilight wasn't a stupid pony, but these ponies obviously were, or at least Pinkie Pie was. Pinkie Pie's overblown reaction to this, combined with Applejack's constant lying, led to one obvious, horrible conclusion. They knew. Somehow they knew, and Applejack had invited Twilight over because they had planned to stop her. Twilight thought of all of this in only an instant, and in that instant Big Mac focused his eyes at her and prepared to charge. He didn't take 2 steps before Twilight conjured a weak bolt of lightning, striking him in the shoulder and knocking him back into the wall. He collapsed with a heavy thud. He picked his head up, slowly, looked at her, but then fell unconscious.
Oh no,
said Pinkie, who was now cradling Applejack.
Not again.
Again? This time, Twilight did feel stupid. She began to laugh. She continued, hard and loud. It was just so silly. All this time, she had been working under the assumption that she had been the only one to come back. She assumed the elements had something to do with it. It just seemed obvious. But she thought it was her having the element of magic and all the power gained from killing the other holders. Somehow, she didn't pause to consider that it was only the element of magic, and if that was the case, every other element holder she killed would have been put in the same position as her. Strange, considering all the other intuitive logic leaps she had made since she had returned. She finally stopped laughing and looked down at Pinkie Pie. She drew closer and watched Pinkie's eyes fill with horror. This was too easy. She felt for Pinkie's element and pulled. Taking it was almost as easy as taking Applejack's. Pinkie Pie suddenly felt faint, as if all the energy had been drained from her body. She was lucky to already be on the ground, or else she would have fallen over.
Pinkie?
She looked into Applejack's eyes.
Pinkie? Run.
Pinkie Pie didn't feel like she could run. Maybe she could walk, slowly, but that wouldn't help. She was already as good as dead again.
It's too late for you two.
Twilight's cheer only served to make Pinkie feel even more horrified. It was like all the happiness inside her was gone forever. It was like she was watching her foals die all over again.
Why can't you just leave us alone?
Pinkie Pie slumped down next to Applejack, feeling too tired and scared to continue comforting the pony. Twilight laughed again.
To be honest, I was going to do just that this time. I didn't need to kill you.
Pinkie opened her mouth to speak, but was cut off.
I needed to kill you last time.
Twilight approached them. Pinkie didn't bother to try to get away.
This time, I did some research and found another way. You all could have had a nice, quiet life once I took your elements. But no, you had to try and stop me, didn't you?
Her eyelids were half closed now. She looked suddenly sleepy.
Tell me, What exactly were you two planning?
Does it matter? Pinky closed her eyes. She didn't want to look at Twilight anymore. She moved a little, snuggling closer to Applejack. At least this time she'd die next to a friend.
No, I guess it doesn't. And what is wrong with me?
There was a moment of silence, then a thud. Pinky opened her eyes. Twilight had collapsed. Pinky blinked, too shocked to do anything.
I don't know what happened, but it looks like maybe we caught a break.
Applejack took a deep breath. Pinky forced herself to get up, even though it was the last thing she wanted to do, except for dying, of course. There was a frantic knock on the door. Pinky almost fell down in shock. A moment later, the door swung open, and Rainbow Dash burst inside.
Pinky, there you are. I've been looking all over for you, and what in the world is going on?
Her eyes darted between Applejack, Big Mac, and Twilight, before locking onto Pinky.
What's wrong with them? What happened? What's going on? I don't understand. I'll try to explain things, but first I'm going to lie back down.
She did just that. Pinky tried to bring herself to giggle, to smile, to do something, but she just couldn't feel it in her anymore. She could see Applejack try to get up, but all she managed to do was roll over and look at Rainbow Dash.
Twilight did something to us. I thought she was going to kill us, but then she just fell over.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Rainbow Dash was panicking.
What in heaven's name has happened?
Now Rarity was here. Her saddlebags were full to bursting with who knows what, probably for the sleepover she thought she was coming for. Pinky would have laughed at how funny things were turning out to be, except she didn't feel like laughing.
No, don't bother to explain just now. We have to hurry.
Rarity put her hoof to Rainbow Dash's mouth, and Rainbow turned silent.
Rainbow Dash, since you're the only one currently not on the floor, could you please be a dear and fly Twilight over to my house?
She opened her saddlebags and pulled out a large cloth bag and a key.
Her comfort isn't a priority. Just wrap her up in this and throw her in my basement. Now, you do know where the entrance to my basement is, do you not?
Rainbow Dash's mouth was hanging wide open as she shook her head slowly. Rarity sighed.
Very well. Just leave her anywhere in the house, and I'll attend to it when I get there.
Rarity walked over to Big Mac and began looking him over. Her horn began to glow, and slowly Big Mac floated above Rarity's head.
Don't drop him.
Rarity looked like she was concentrating.
Now, don't you worry. I have everything under control. I'll just lay him down here.
She was straining to move the big pony, but she managed to lay him softly on the couch.
Rainbow Dash, do as I say.
Rainbow Dash had been standing around doing nothing, but at Rarity's command her eyes snapped into focus.
That's better. Are you poor dears all right? Should I send some pony to help later? We're coming too.
Applejack finally stood up. Rainbow Dash finished tying Twilight up and took the makeshift bag into her mouth before flying out the door.
Right, Pinky?
Pinky desperately wanted to know what was happening, and nodded. It was a struggle to stand up. Her legs felt like they would give way under her at any moment, but she was determined to follow Applejack's example and go with Rarity. Suddenly, Pinky felt much lighter. She looked down and saw she and Applejack were glowing with Rarity's magic.
I can't carry you both all the way, but I can help. Let's get going.
It was fairly difficult to prop up both Applejack and Pinkie Pie all the way to her home, but the situation clearly called for it. Something terrible had happened already. It was a good thing she had wasted no time in planning out her revenge. Who knows what would have happened if she wasn't ready today. Ignoring the odd looks as they walked through town, they finally arrived at her boutique. Rainbow Dash was already there and had done just as Rarity had asked. Rarity took her key.
Follow me, please.
She waited for Rainbow Dash to pick up Twilight before walking them to her basement door. Taking the key in her mouth, she unlocked the door and gestured for them to go in. Shutting the door behind them, Rarity turned on the lights. There was a collective gasp and a thud as Rainbow dropped Twilight.
What is this?
Rarity grinned.
It's marvelous, isn't it?
Of course, her basement was fully equipped now. Everything was set up for Twilight, everything neat and orderly and in its place. It was just like a professional torture chamber. It even had the dark and dusty look they did in the books, because it was a basement. Rarity supposed that's why it did. Weren't most fictional torture chambers underground? Well, that didn't matter. What mattered was that it was now time. Open the bag. Rainbow hesitated but complied. As soon as the knot was undone, Rarity used her magic to lift Twilight up and place her on the table. Rarity then strapped the purple pony in, tightening the restraints as much as they would go.
Aren't you going to tell us what this is?
Rarity looked at her.
Do you really think this is the time? Any moment now, Twilight could wake up and use her magic.
She levitated a bone saw off the wall.
We should take care of that before anything else, wouldn't you agree?
Rainbow Dash's eyes widened. Rarity looked at Applejack and Pinkie Pie. In turn, they nodded. Rarity got to work. It was tough going, sawing a unicorn's horn off. They were strong and tough, but not invincible. With enough effort, they'd break just like anything else. Once she was 3/4 of the way through, Rarity took Twilight's horn into her mouth and snapped it off. She spit it out in disgust.
Now, can you tell us what all this is?
You set up a torture chamber.
Rarity turned to look at Applejack. Whatever Twilight had done to Pinkie and Applejack, it looked like it was getting worse. Applejack's speech had gotten slower, and she was taking deeper breaths. Rarity's anger flared. She hoped they weren't going to die.
Yes, I did. And if you knew what Twilight had done, you wouldn't have a problem with it.
We know what Twilight's done, but how do you know? Wait, Twilight killed all of you? I thought it was just me and Pinkie.
But Rarity, I went to talk to you months ago. You never said you remembered dying and coming back to relive your life. And Rainbow Dash, you were the first pony I asked, and you didn't look like you remembered either.
Rarity thought about it. She didn't remember Pinkie Pie coming over and asking that. She didn't remember even seeing Pinkie Pie ever since she returned to the past.
Pinkie, you were the first pony I saw when I came back. And when I came back, I didn't know what was going on. I just thought a miracle had happened. I was in a storm, falling to my death, and bam! It was a nice day outside, and everything was all right again. I didn't figure it out until days later, and I didn't realize Twilight had killed me until this morning.
Oh, what about you, Rarity?
I think I know.
Applejack was sweating, her chest rising and falling quickly now.
When I came back, we had only just defeated Nightmare Moon. We were in the castle, and I was disoriented, and all y'all were there. No pony was acting different, even though I sure was. But the next day, I see Pinkie, and she's calling me Apple Rush. I think we came back at different times.
Yes, that explains why I don't remember you asking me anything like that, Pinkie. You must have asked before I arrived.
What about Fluttershy? Did any of you talk to Fluttershy? I did.
Applejack set herself down on the hard stone. Rarity took the piece of cloth Twilight was wrapped up in and folded it a few times before setting it down on the ground. She indicated for Applejack to lie there. Applejack nodded her head and rolled over onto the makeshift mat. Settling down, Applejack continued.
I talked to Fluttershy, and Pinkie talked to you, Rarity. Fluttershy didn't know nothing.
Pinkie gasped.
She survived!
Pinkie was smiling, and it was the first time Rarity had seen Pinkie smile since this whole mess started.
That's why Twilight's here, and why Fluttershy isn't. Twilight didn't kill Fluttershy. Fluttershy killed.
She stopped and frowned again. They were silent for a moment.
It's a good thing, Pinkie. If Fluttershy hadn't killed Twilight, Twilight would have killed her. I had hoped Fluttershy would stop Twilight, and now we know she did.
Rarity turned to face Twilight, who was still unconscious.
Now it is our turn to stop Twilight. We must kill her before she kills us again.
Applejack had fallen unconscious. Luckily, she was already on the floor. Pinkie wasn't looking too well herself. Rarity looked around for something soft for Pinkie, but there wasn't anything.
It's okay, Rarity.
Pinkie slowly stumbled over to where Applejack was.
I'm sure Applejack won't mind.
She collapsed onto Applejack, and Rainbow Dash rushed over. She moved Pinkie and Applejack so they were leaning on each other.
I guess it's up to us, Rainbow Dash.
For what? Rainbow Dash's head jerked up at the sound of Twilight's voice. The unicorn was awake, looking a bit groggy, but awake. She took a moment to feebly pull at her restraints before giving up. I see. Well, it's not that easy to stop a powerful unicorn like myself, even if I seem to be having a hard time concentrating. Twilight closed her eyes, a focused look on her face. Rainbow Dash looked down at the two ponies next to her. Applejack seemed to be coming around again, but Pinkie looked to have fallen asleep.
Come on, it's okay.
Dash's heart was racing.
Don't die on me, you two. You just can't.
Pinkie's head perked up at the sound of Rainbow Dash's voice. She looked at Dash, her eyes wet, eyelids half closed.
Don't worry, Rainbow. We're not going to die, but I'm just going to rest for a while.
Rainbow Dash watched Pinkie close her eyes again and put her head down. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Applejack didn't look nearly as well. She was sweating, but when Rainbow Dash moved to the other side next to Applejack, she felt cold. Dash glanced back up, only to see Twilight still concentrating. Rarity hadn't moved or said a word. She only stood there, grinning. To be honest, Rainbow Dash found it a bit creepy.
You haven't noticed yet, have you? Did you really think I would let you wake up if you could just magic yourself out of this predicament?
Twilight opened her eyes again and looked around, nervously. Finally, she looked up at her own forehead, and her face contorted into a horrible mixture of anger and sorrow.
No.
Twilight sounded as if all her dreams had shattered right before her eyes, and there was nothing she could do about it, and she knew it. Rainbow Dash definitely knew that feeling. Come to think of it, she didn't know exactly why she could relate. Rarity laughed.
Oh, yes. There's nothing you can do. You're just like I was, back then. Now you're the one trapped, the one whose life is over, and whose dreams are gone. And I'm the one who gets to gloat about it. You don't know anything about real dreams. I had real dedication. I spent my entire life toward a single defining purpose, something that would change the world. What did you do, Rarity? Make dresses? Even if I never cooked your books, after a century, no pony would remember you. You have no idea how much work I put into getting your stupid elements.
She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, her face was a mask of calm.
But it doesn't matter. You've cut off my horn, and you're going to kill me. I'll be fine.
Rarity looked livid. She started yelling, but really, Rainbow Dash wasn't interested in listening to them anymore. Twilight was taken care of, she admitted to herself. The two ponies beside her were more important. She wasn't going to let them die now. Rainbow Dash didn't know what to do, though. Pinkie looked like she was okay, but Applejack looked to be in serious condition. She was shuffling around, dazed, looking scared, like she didn't know what was going on around her. Rainbow Dash put her hooves around Applejack, trying to get her to lie still. She rubbed her back, hoping it would calm her down.
Shh, Applejack. Everything's okay. You're okay.
Applejack's fidgeting had stopped, but now she was shivering. Rainbow Dash continued to rub her back slowly. Applejack suddenly looked up.
Rainbow Dash?
Her green eyes met Rainbow's. Rainbow Dash nodded.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't feel too good.
Applejack looked around. It looked like she was coming back to herself.
Is Twilight taken care of?
Rainbow nodded again. For now. Don't worry about it. Applejack's ears fell.
The last time I felt like this, I was about to die. Am I going to die again?
Rainbow Dash couldn't help but hug her friend.
You're not going to die, not if I can do anything about it.
But Rainbow Dash couldn't do anything more, and she knew it. She felt totally helpless. She could feel the tears well up.
You can't die.
Rainbow Dash got closer.
I need you,
continued Rainbow Dash.
We all need you. We can't all be together if you're not there.
Applejack tried to smile at the silliness of that statement, but she couldn't tell if she managed it or not. She could hear Rainbow Dash clearly, but the sounds of Rarity and Twilight yelling sounded like they were both underwater and far away. She felt cold and sick. It was a strange, terrible feeling, like wanting to vomit but wanting nothing more than to not vomit at the same time. Her muscles felt like they weren't all there, almost like they were made of a soft, spongy material that wasn't attached to her body. She stopped trying to move them, and she found herself feeling a bit better when she did. Applejack struggled to keep her eyes open. The world around her was fuzzy, and she strained to bring it all back into focus. Even Rainbow Dash's nice, pretty words were starting to drown into darkness. She let her eyes close. With horror, Applejack once again remembered the last time she let the darkness claim her. She wasn't going to let it happen again. With great effort, she forced her eyes back open. The world was still blurry. She could feel her heart rate increase, and her body started to ache. But slowly, Rainbow Dash's voice became clearer.
When I get married, of course you'll be my mayor of honor. It'll be so awesome. You'll see.
Applejack had no idea what led Rainbow Dash's speech to weddings, but she smiled anyway.
A bit early to be talking about that, ain't it?
The words hurt her throat, but she didn't mind. There was a pause as Dash looked at her. Applejack stared at Rainbow Dash as the voice of Rarity in Twilight finally began to make sense.
Applejack, I thought you were going to.
Dash's eyes had tears in them.
Told you,
said Pinkie Pie, whose eyes were still closed. She was smiling. Applejack had completely forgotten she was even there.
I told you we weren't going to die. Still.
Dash wiped away her tears.
You had me worried there, AJ.
That's it. Applejack perked her head up to see what was going on. I'm not listening to another word. She was fiddling with something around Twilight's head. When Rarity took a step back, Applejack could see a bridle around the purple unicorn's face, one with a large bit. Twilight was struggling, trying to say something, but the bit prevented her from getting anything out. Applejack wondered why Rarity chose something like that to gag Twilight, but didn't dwell on it for long.
Now, on to business.
Rarity had turned to face them all as she levitated a ball-peen hammer into the air.
I wouldn't dream of intentionally taking away any of your righteous retribution, but it seems that only Rainbow Dash and myself are fit for this task.
What are you talking about?
Said Rainbow Dash.
You're not thinking what I think you're thinking, are you?
Rarity let the hammer fall. It contacted the ground with a light clink and took out a small chip out of the concrete floor.
Come again?
Applejack saw something in Rarity's eyes. She couldn't tell right off what it was, only that she didn't like it. It made it look like something was wrong with Rarity.
I mean, we can't kill her.
Applejack's head turned to her direction too fast, and she cringed at the pain in her muscles. Rarity's mouth hung open in shock, and even Pinkie's eyes were half open, looking in Rainbow's direction. Rarity closed her mouth and gave a very chilling smile.
My dear, it must be difficult to understand from your perspective. After all, you died many years earlier than the rest of us. I understand that, but you simply must see that she is a danger to us all, so long as she is alive.
Rainbow Dash looked concerned.
But she doesn't have a horn. What can she do to us now?
Who knows?
Said Pinkie Pie, lifting her head up for a moment.
She didn't need a horn to kill me.
Pinkie's head went right back down.
Nor I.
Rarity sighed, rubbing the side of her head with her hoof.
This point is non-negotiable. I personally will not stand idle while Twilight lives.
Rainbow Dash looked at Twilight. Applejack couldn't guess what the pony was thinking, but she did see acceptance on her face.
All right,
said Rainbow Dash.
But why do you have all this stuff? I hoped it was for something else, but now it's obvious. Do you really think Twilight needs to be tortured? Isn't killing her enough for you?
Rarity glared.
I don't know.
Applejack couldn't remember her ever speaking that way in her old life.
Why don't we ask around?
She looked at Pinkie, who was resting again with her eyes closed.
Pinkie Pie.
Uh-huh, I'm listening.
Twilight caused that explosion at Sugar Cube Corner. You died in it. Your Fulls, the Cakes, and several other ponies who just happened to be near the store that day died in that explosion. Doesn't Twilight deserve more than a merciful death for that? Applejack, you trusted Twilight to help you. Instead, she killed you and your Full. She never even had a chance to live.
Applejack felt her heart constrict. Her eyes teared up again, and she suddenly had to choke back a sob. She thought she was done crying. Apparently she was wrong. Applejack hadn't known her foal was a girl. Thinking about that one detail made her think about all the other things she missed out on. The things that did happen, and the things that could have happened if Twilight hadn't been an evil murderer. But the way Rarity brought it up just made her angry. She found out her foal was a girl because Rarity wanted fodder to justify her revenge. Deep, deep down, Applejack wanted revenge too, but she now completely understood Big Mac's point. Still, it was hard to accept. She gritted her teeth and tried to force the tears to stop.
As for me, none of you would know, as I was the last to die. Twilight took everything I had from me. She set fire to my boutique, with me still in it.
Applejack winced at the thought. Burning to death was not at the top of the list of ways she wanted to die. At least she had sort of fallen asleep.
You may think I died in that fire.
Applejack felt her eyes close, not wanting to think about what was undoubtedly about to come next.
But I didn't. It took me days to die of my burns.
Suddenly she got that look in her eye again. That look that told Applejack something might be wrong with this pony.
She has to suffer! She has to! Don't you understand?
I don't care what you do. I just want to go home and sleep. Can't you take me home?
I'll take you home, Pinkie Pie. Rainbow Dash stood up.
This is over. We don't need to be here anymore.
She looked Applejack in the eye.
Right, Applejack?
Applejack thought about it for a moment. Did she want to stay and watch or something? She didn't feel like she could, even if she wanted to. She was so tired, and her body hurt so much. She nodded her head at Rainbow Dash. She didn't want to be here anymore.
Rarity can do what she thinks best.
Applejack tried to stand, but her body started to get that distant feeling again, so she stopped.
I'll come with Big Mac for you.
Rainbow Dash put Pinkie on her back.
You're in too bad a shape for me to take you by myself.
Applejack nodded. As the two ponies left, it was just Rarity and Applejack, along with the still bound and gagged Twilight. She had stopped struggling completely now. She seemed to have finally just accepted her situation.
I'm real tired, Rarity, but I want you to know what my big brother told me when I was thinking thoughts like yours.
Rarity seemed to be listening, so Applejack pressed on.
What you're wanting isn't good. I don't want you to find out the hard way that revenge don't help no pony.
Feeling like it was safe to do so now, Applejack let herself fall asleep. Generosity. Rarity and Twilight were finally alone. Applejack was on her way back home with Rainbow Dash and Big Macintosh to rest. Rarity would finally get what she deserved. She magically levitated the ball-peen hammer that she had dropped earlier, and turned to face Twilight, who still had the large bit in her mouth so she couldn't speak. Twilight didn't look like she wanted to say anything. Rarity paused for a moment. She didn't give much thought to it, really, but she decided she would not let Twilight say anything. Quickly, she magically slammed the hammer down hard on Twilight's right hind knee. Following the sound of bone cracking, Twilight merely grunted. Rarity smiled at her, pleased that her captive had enough fight in her to hold back screams. It'd be a lot more fun this way. She wasted no time in slamming the hammer down again on the other hind knee. She hit it again and again, each slam of the hammer accompanied by a corresponding crunch as bones splintered into ever smaller fragments. Still, Twilight had made no attempt to scream, although tears were streaming down her face. Her eyes filled with malice. She almost looked like she thought she was the victim here. Rarity didn't want to look at them anymore. Rarity had spent several hours making this room neat and tidy, putting everything she had bought in its proper place. And so she didn't have to look at all when she dropped the bloody hammer onto the floor and magically picked up a set of sewing needles and a spool of thread. With a practiced motion, she took out the smallest needle and threaded it. She took a deep breath while staring into Twilight's eyes, and grinned. To Rarity's annoyance, Twilight only fidgeted as Rarity sewed her eyelids shut. When finished, Rarity growled to herself before taking all the remaining sewing needles, dividing them into groups of 2, and jabbing them haphazardly into Twilight's closed eyes. She left them there. Still, Twilight did not scream.
"What is wrong with you? Why can't you scream for me?"
She grabbed a nearby candle she was saving and magically lit it. She placed it on its side so that the flame was kissing the side of Twilight's stomach. She could hear the singeing of fur before Twilight squirmed out of the way, knocking the candle over. Damn it! She was starting to get frustrated. Good thing she brought lighter fluid. She didn't want Twilight to burst into flames. No, that could kill her. So, she took care to only douse half of Twilight's midsection with the liquid, before picking up the fallen candle and relighting it. She placed the candle next to Twilight again, and watched the pony light up like a small, contained bonfire. It was glorious, or at least it was, for only a moment. Rarity saw Twilight's mouth open, but it slammed shut with only a small squeak of pain. Twilight was biting her lip hard enough to draw blood in order to stop herself from screaming. Rarity had had enough. She hadn't even really started, but already this wasn't going like she had planned. As Twilight's stomach continued to burn, Rarity grabbed her knife.
"Why won't you scream?"
she said, before plunging the blade into Twilight's flank. No scream, not even a gasp.
"Why?"
she shouted again, and again the knife entered Twilight's flesh. Blood began to pool under the table, making a mess.
"Why can't you be like a normal pony?"
Rarity's eyes were watering. She was crying. She didn't care.
"Why?"
She started to hack away mindlessly.
"Why couldn't you just be our friend? Why did you have to do it? Why can't you be sorry?"
She let the knife drop as she slumped to the ground. She had gone overboard. Twilight's intestines were slopping out of a large gash in her stomach, and the flames on the other side had begun to peter out, leaving an island of blackened flesh in its wake. Twilight had died. She had died without giving Rarity any satisfaction at all. Rarity wondered why she couldn't have let Twilight talk first. Maybe then she would have gotten something out of this. Instead of the righteous vindication she was hoping for, she just felt sick. Pinky groggily opened her eyes. She felt loads better now. In fact, she felt like she was a brand new pony. She bounced up out of the bed, but stopped, realizing this wasn't her house. Where was she? Then she remembered. Halfway to her house, Pinky and Rainbow Dash decided that it'd be best for her to stay at Applejack's. There was no pony there but Big Mac, and it would save Rainbow Dash a few trips. "Glad to see you got all your energy back." Pinky looked behind her. She hadn't even noticed a second bed in the room. "I do too, but Big Mac insists that I do some more resting up. I tried to argue, but he put his hoof down. And honestly, I suppose I don't mind." She gave a sad sort of smile that made Pinky feel sad too. "Pinkie Pie, what are you doing out of bed?" Rainbow Dash walked in. She was really dirty. Pinky patted the Pegasus a few times and watched the dust poof off her coat. Rainbow sneezed. "Yeah, I just finished helping Big Mac dig a hole. You know, for Twilight." She rubbed the back of her head, obviously nervous. Pinky felt herself frown for a moment. "Did Rarity..." Rainbow Dash shrugged. "I saw her bring the body, but it was in a closed box. I don't know if she did or not, and Rarity isn't saying one way or another. She just said it doesn't matter, and we should stop worrying about it." Applejack looked away. "I hope she made the right decision." Big Mac trotted into the room suddenly, also covered with dirt. He took one look at Pinky and said, "Are you sure you should be out of bed?" Pinky hadn't felt so good in a long, long time, but she saw the concern on the stallion's face, and decided that just this once she'd contain her excitement and lie down. Big Mac smiled, and Applejack chuckled as she got back into bed. "But tomorrow, we should have a party." Big Mac frowned again. "Oh no, that doesn't sound very..." "I don't mean to celebrate Twilight's, well, you know. I just think it's the perfect time to celebrate our second chance together. We can all get together and start fresh." Big Mac's smile returned. so long as your heart's in the right place.
All right, said Rainbow Dash. But why do you have all this stuff? I hoped it was for something else, but now it's obvious. Do you really think Twilight needs to be tortured? Isn't killing her enough for you?
Rarity glared.
I don't know.
Applejack couldn't remember her ever speaking that way in her old life.
Why don't we ask around?
She looked at Pinkie, who was resting again with her eyes closed.
Pinkie Pie. Uh-huh, I'm listening. Twilight caused that explosion at Sugar Cube Corner. You died in it. Your Fulls, the Cakes, and several other ponies who just happened to be near the store that day died in that explosion. Doesn't Twilight deserve more than a merciful death for that? Applejack, you trusted Twilight to help you. Instead, she killed you and your Full. She never even had a chance to live.
Applejack felt her heart constrict. Her eyes teared up again, and she suddenly had to choke back a sob. She thought she was done crying. Apparently she was wrong. Applejack hadn't known her Full was a girl. Thinking about that one detail made her think about all the other things she missed out on. The things that did happen, and the things that could have happened if Twilight hadn't been an evil murderer. But the way Rarity brought it up just made her angry. She found out her Full was a girl because Rarity wanted fodder to justify her revenge. Deep, deep down, Applejack wanted revenge too, but she now completely understood Big Mac's point. Still, it was hard to accept. She gritted her teeth and tried to force the tears to stop.
As for me, none of you would know, as I was the last to die. Twilight took everything I had from me. She set fire to my boutique, with me still in it.
Applejack winced at the thought. Burning to death was not at the top of the list of ways she wanted to die. At least she had sort of fallen asleep.
You may think I died in that fire.
Applejack felt her eyes close, not wanting to think about what was undoubtedly about to come next.
But I didn't. It took me days to die of my burns.
Suddenly she got that look in her eye again. That look that told Applejack something might be wrong with this pony.
She has to suffer! She has to! Don't you understand? I don't care what you do. I just want to go home and sleep. Can't you take me home?
I'll take you home, Pinkie Pie. Rainbow Dash stood up.
This is over. We don't need to be here anymore.
She looked Applejack in the eye.
Right, Applejack?
Applejack thought about it for a moment. Did she want to stay and watch or something? She didn't feel like she could, even if she wanted to. She was so tired, and her body hurt so much. She nodded her head at Rainbow Dash. She didn't want to be here anymore. Rarity can do what she thinks best. Applejack tried to stand, but her body started to get that distant feeling again, so she stopped.
I'll come with Big Mac for you.
Rainbow Dash put Pinkie on her back.
You're in too bad a shape for me to take you by myself.
Applejack nodded. As the two ponies left, it was just Rarity and Applejack, along with the still bound and gagged Twilight. She had stopped struggling completely now. She seemed to have finally just accepted her situation.
I'm real tired, Rarity, but I want you to know what my big brother told me when I was thinking thoughts like yours.
Rarity seemed to be listening, so Applejack pressed on.
What you're wanting isn't good. I don't want you to find out the hard way that revenge don't help no pony.
Feeling like it was safe to do so now, Applejack let herself fall asleep. Acceptance. Rarity and Twilight were finally alone. Applejack was on her way back home with Rainbow Dash and Big Macintosh to rest. Rarity would finally get what she deserved. She magically levitated the ball-peen hammer that she had dropped earlier, and turned to face Twilight, who still had the large bit in her mouth so she couldn't speak. Twilight didn't look like she wanted to say anything. Rarity paused for a moment. She didn't give much thought to it, really, but she decided she would remove the bit and let Twilight speak. She walked over, expectantly, looking Twilight in the eyes. Twilight didn't meet her gaze, nor did she say anything. Several moments passed, and Rarity grew annoyed. She was showing this pony a sense of mercy, a chance to get out some last words she hadn't already gotten out in their previous argument. Certainly there was something left unsaid. Rarity gritted her teeth.
Don't you have anything to say?
Twilight turned her head, but kept her eyes looking to the side.
Like what? Want me to beg? Sorry, that's not going to happen. That's disappointing, but not what I was thinking of. I don't care.
Twilight turned her head away again. Rarity slammed her hammer down on the table in anger, next to Twilight's knee.
I am giving you the chance to say some final words, because that's what decent ponies do. Anything you want to say. Come now, there must be something.
Twilight turned her head to face Rarity again, a look of calculation behind her eyes. She suddenly smiled, and Rarity found herself getting even angrier.
I get it. This isn't about me. This is about you. It couldn't be about me. What could I say that I didn't already say earlier? No, you want me to apologize to you, directly and exclusively. You want me to say how oh so sorry I am for ruining your life and killing your stupid friends. Well, you're not getting that. So just hurry up and kill me already. I have things to be doing.
Rarity's jaw dropped before clamping down hard in anger. Why couldn't she have just kept Twilight gagged? Now she just wanted Twilight dead, and so lifted the hammer up magically once again, only to slam it down as hard as she possibly could onto Twilight's skull. Rarity blinked as drops of blood splattered on her face. The sickening sound of Twilight's skull caving in should have been music to her ears, but it just made her sick. Rainbow Dash almost relented, but she took one look at the situation, and it hit her. Flashes of all these ponies, how they used to be in her memories, happy and idealistic. Ponies who would have never have thought of doing such a horrible thing, let alone to some pony who had been their friend. Rainbow Dash stamped her hoof, determination etched on her face.
No. What do you mean, no? No is not an option. Twilight has to die. No, she doesn't. She doesn't have a horn. We can take her on without her magic. Horns grow back, you know.
Rarity clenched her teeth. She took a step toward Dash, but Dash didn't take a step back.
Then we'll keep it filed down, but we can't kill her. We're supposed to be good ponies. It'd be wrong to kill her. I won't let you do it. I won't let you stop me.
The previously floating hammer began to float once again, kept aloft with Rarity's magic. Rainbow Dash began to wonder if she had made the right decision.
You can't kill her.
Pinky's eyes were open again, her head up. She looked worried.
Dash hasn't done anything.
Rarity didn't glance in Pinky's direction.
I'm not going to kill her, just disable her is all. Twilight must be taken care of, and no manner of keeping her alive will be sufficient. But Rarity.
She was looking at the ground. She thought about her feelings, and gaining a sudden surge of strength, she lifted her head and looked Rarity in the eyes. What she saw was disconcerting, but she continued to keep her gaze locked.
No, you can't do this. Just look what it's done to you already. You're nothing like the Rarity I remember, and I think it's because you've been doing nothing but thinking about killing Twilight. It's not good for a pony to get swallowed up in such dark thoughts. And if just thinking about it too much has changed you, just think what would happen if you actually went through with it. That's idiotic. I'm not going to speak with you about this any longer.
Rarity began to advance again, her hammer floating ominously next to her.
Rarity, please, don't hurt Rainbow Dash. She's our friend. It's not worth it. But if I don't get rid of Rainbow Dash, I can't get rid of Twilight.
She threw her hammer into the wall, knocking down assorted items from the shelves.
Fine.
Rarity's eyes filled with hot tears.
I hope you're happy.
Rarity ran up the stairs and out of her own basement, leaving Applejack, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and a still restrained Twilight alone. Rainbow Dash took a few deep breaths, trying to figure out what to do now. First, she decided she'd help Applejack and Pinkie Pie back to their homes. Rainbow Dash could take Pinkie back by herself, but Rainbow needed help with Applejack, And so, after Pinkie Pie was dropped off, she would retrieve Big Mac's assistance. Together, they would take Applejack back to Sweet Apple Acres. Then, it was just Twilight and Rainbow Dash. Rainbow removed the bit that was preventing Twilight from speaking. Then, she undid the bindings that kept Twilight strapped to the table. As Twilight arose, their eyes locked. Rainbow Dash stared for a moment, wondering if she had done the right thing, or if Twilight was going to attack as soon as her hooves were on stable ground. She stumbled off the table, but when she had steadied herself, she didn't move. They simply looked at each other, and Rainbow Dash opened her mouth to speak. "I didn't do it for you. It was the right thing to do." Twilight didn't say anything as Rainbow Dash left. The next several days were a mess. Applejack and Pinkie Pie's recoveries were slow going, and Rainbow Dash did everything she could to help. Rarity hadn't been seen since she stormed out of her basement, and Rainbow also had to keep track of Twilight to make sure she didn't disappear to allow her horn to grow back. Then it happened. About a week after Rainbow let Twilight go, she awoke in the middle of the night to find Twilight had somehow not only made it up to her cloud home, but also found a way to walk on the cloud floor. Rainbow Dash barely had time to blink before Twilight lunged forward, and Dash felt the sharp prick of a needle enter her flesh before her eyes closed, and the darkness claimed her. Waking up again, she found herself locked in a cage, in some sort of dungeon. Twilight was there, her horn somehow regrown. Rainbow Dash knew it was too soon for that. Only magic could have regrown that horn so quickly. Looking around the dark, musty old room, Dash saw all of her friends locked in cages similar to her own, each with varying amounts of fear, hatred, and anger on their faces. All except for Fluttershy, who seemed to be still asleep. When Rainbow Dash caught sight of Rarity, her heart almost leapt out of her chest. Rarity was glaring directly at her, not at Twilight or any of the other ponies, but at her, Rainbow Dash. Her eyes were cold and hate-filled, and Rainbow Dash suddenly felt she deserved to be hated. I'm sorry. She didn't think this could have happened, at least not with so little warning. How could this be? Who could have helped Twilight regrow her horn so quickly? There's no way Twilight did this by herself. Don't apologize. You did the right thing. For me. And as a reward, I'm going to kill you first. But you said you didn't need to kill us this time. Twilight smiled. It was a terrible smile. Rainbow Dash thought she had seen such an expression before. On Rarity. I wasn't going to kill you, but now, since things have gotten so out of hoof, I'm just going to go back to the good old severing method I did last time, for each of you, even the ones whose elements I've already taken. It'll be quick and easy, and since things have been so messed up for me, I don't think the subtle approach is possible anymore. So here we are. Twilight advanced onto Rainbow Dash. Rainbow turned around and kicked at the gate of her cage. It rattled and shook, but did not break. She kicked again and again, but it would not break. Don't bother. I sealed the cages magically. You're not getting out. Rainbow Dash stopped kicking. How did you do this? Who's helping you? Why would I tell you that? I know you're all going to get another chance after this. Giving you any knowledge about me or my plans will just make it easier for you to win next time. And I'm not going to make things even harder for myself. She took another step toward Rainbow Dash. Rainbow glared at Twilight, unafraid. For you, Rainbow Dash, all I have to do is kill you right now. I've already betrayed you so thoroughly, your death now by my hooves will give me what I need. Twilight smirked. Then get it over with. She closed her eyes and heard a loud crackling sound. She didn't even feel the bolt strike her back, burning through her flesh and stopping her heart. Back in the blue mists, Rainbow Dash waited for her element to show up again. It didn't take long. Let me give you a piece of advice, said Loyalty, emerging from the fog. You know, for next time. Rainbow Dash remained silent. She knew she messed up. She messed up bad. She didn't want to think about that now. She just wanted to get her chance to try again, so she could fix it. Hopefully her friends would forgive her. She hoped very, very, very much her friends could forgive her for her mistake. But Loyalty didn't seem to care about Rainbow Dash's feelings at the moment, as she continued to speak.
Sometimes we have to do the wrong thing for the greater good, you know?
Rainbow Dash didn't pay much attention to that. She didn't want to think about how much she messed up.
So, when to this time? I'll remember everything, right?
Loyalty nodded.
Except for being here. Then just send me to the very beginning, as early as you can. Cool. You'll get it this time.